Hey guys, welcome to episode 79. Seems like we're not that far away from 100 of Van Gogh letters. Hi Chelsea, I hope Mel, I hope you're okay. I believe you took a bit of a fall. Come to me. Please do vote in the poll if you haven't already. Let's have a look if anyone has voted yet. Hey guys, welcome to. It's funny, I can't see the poll. Tell me, where's the poll? So 80%, although there haven't been too many votes. Tell me, where's the poll? But most of you are saying that he went to the 80%, although there haven't been too many votes. A couple of you say that he hung around old brothels, and so far no votes for the others. Most of you are saying that we are going 80%. Answer that question. A couple of you, some of you hung around old brothels, and so far no votes for the others. Most of you are saying that we are going 80%. Answer that question. A couple of you, some of you hung around old brothels, and so far no votes. Most of you are saying that we are going 80%. Much answer that question. Some of you hang around probably with 2 or 3 letters, and then I'm answering the question. I'll show you notice I took with 2 or 3 letters, and then I'm answering the question. I'll show you notice I took kind of an up close and then I'm answering the brush stroke. So we're going to look at that kind of an up close and then I want to tell you guys how to brush stroke. So we're going to look at that, tell the story first, then I want to tell you guys how to brush stroke. Remember, this is the last letter. We're going to look at that, tell the story first, then I want to tell you guys how to brush stroke. Remember, this is the last letter. We're going to look at that, tell the story first, I remember this. I don't think we also dealt with this letter from Palestine. I remember this. I don't think we spoke about the advantages of marriage and that sort of thing. So we're going to kick off with April the 13th. And what we spoke about is the advantages of marriage today in terms of chronological time, obviously, April with over 100 years ago, but yesterday in terms of chronological time. And what really says there, I was surprised that it was over 100 years ago, but during yesterday in terms of chronological time. And what really says there, I was surprised that it was 100 years ago, during yesterday. Let's have a look at who's here. Is anyone else hearing what the speakers are doing? Okay, so that's surprised that it was 100 years ago, during yesterday. I think it's because of that. That should be sorted out now. Is the sound better? Is this? I think I sorted out the sound. Sorry, I was basically streaming 2 things at the same time. Sound better? Okay. I think I'm going to kick off just by telling you guys a short little story. Right outside my lounge is a outside light, but it sort of looks like a basket around the light bulb, but it's not enclosed. So it's sort of the framework almost of a basket. It's kind of I don't know what the shape is, but it's a sort of hexagonal frame right around the light. And in the past, sparrows have tried to turn that frame into a nest. Basically, use the structure of those, well, the structure going around the light bulb to sort of anchor their nest. And you see what's going on when you open the door, and there's just kind of branches and leaves lying there. Looks like there was a storm, but meanwhile it's these sparrows trying to get twigs and leaves to sort of you know, fill up um, the sort of what can one call it? It's kind of like a um, series of lines, but anyway, but they can't do it because it's just not. It's too slippery, and so when I went out tonight, I actually saw the sparrows flying from that um, framework, and and then I just wondered where they were right now. So I looked out the window, and both sparrows are sitting on that framework, kind of together. It's only it's a part under the balcony. There's a balcony on top, and so they're kind of shivering together. But they're at least out of the rain, and so they are determined to try and make a nest there. They're not going to be able to. In the past, they have tied string there to try and help them secure the nest so that the nest can, um, you know, get itself lodged, I guess. But the problem is if they succeed, you're going to have a bunch of twigs surrounding a light bulb, which is not very practical either for the light or for the birds even. So, but what I'm going to try and do is get a photo for you guys of these two. I mean, when you look at them, they look like two pom poms sitting next to one another directly under this light. And all they're trying to do is stay warm, stay dry, stay out of the rain. It has been raining quite a lot, but they're like directly under this light. So I'll try and get a picture on my phone for you guys. Shall we jump into Van Gogh letters? Just a quick hello, Paddy, Robbie, Robin, Silent Murmur, Ellie, Alina, Yvonne. Good to see all of you guys. Daria. Bear in mind, I'm about a week away from flying to the States. As you can see, it's actually really cold. I've actually got like those. Do you guys? I wonder if I can show you guys. This is what I'm wearing on my feet. So it has just suddenly gotten really, really cold here. I do see that the temperatures in Myrtle Beach, which is where I'm going to be spending a bit of time, are about the same as what they are here in terms of the maximum temperatures. But I remember last year, this time, I was already in America. In fact, I think, in Boise. Okay, shall we get started? It would be fun to do a meetup in Connecticut. Someone's actually contacted me with their contact details saying they're also in Connecticut. Can I meet up there? So who knows, maybe we can, maybe we will. Okay, let's get started with this letter from the 13th. And look at those words. I am rather surprised that you have not written me once during these days. And that's got to be quite painful. You know, like what's going on here is Van Gogh is going through a hard time. Perhaps the hardest time in his entire life. He's lost his ear, he's lost his friend, he's lost his home, and the townsfolk are turning on him as well. And you could actually think in a way, out of all the times that he needs his brother, this is perhaps the worst or the most that he's ever needed Theo. And for the first time, Theo's not actually there. Theo's gone to the Netherlands. Theo's in love. Theo's getting married, and that's got to make the blow, that the gut punch that Van Gogh is suffering, so much worse. You know, at the time that he's suffering, you could actually argue that at the time that he's suffering the most, at the time that he's struggling the most, at the time that he's at his lowest ebb, his brother is arguably the happiest he's ever been and the happiest he ever will be in his life. Just think about that as like a twist of fate. And that's why I say, you know, Van Gogh was suicidal, then now was the time to do it, because he really had no one on his side. Even Roland had left all. And so this is a very important hinge of time to get a sense of Van Gogh. How does Van Gogh deal with adversity when the chips are down? How does he deal with his misery? And there's no two ways about it. He is miserable. He is in a bad situation. He is vulnerable. He is helpless. And I would even say that he's starting to feel depressed. I don't think he's really had depression ever, but I think he's starting to feel depressed, meaning that all of these events cascading together, compounding together, they're eventually getting to him, and he's eventually starting to realize the scale of his loss. And perhaps perhaps he's starting to feel a bit sorry for himself. Remember, this is also the year of the World Fair, which he was gearing towards. That also seems to be a lost cause on top of everything else. Now, again, you can say, no, 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 I don't think he's depressed. I think he's actually got mental illness. And so this is where we're going to try to discern between one possible truth and another possibility. Okay, so here we go. I'm rather surprised that you haven't written to me once during these days. However, as on previous occasions, when you went to Holland, it is mostly accidental. So he's kind of saying, I don't blame you. Maybe it's just, you're in Holland. Maybe you're not getting my letters. He says, I hope that everything has gone off well with you. Meanwhile, I've been obliged to ask Tassé for 10 meters of canvas and some tubes. So if you think about it, it's quite cheeky of him. While his brother's away, he's basically sent a letter, I guess, to an art dealer and said, I'm ordering this and my brother's going to pay, I'm ordering it and my brother will foot the bill. Kind of cheeky. I mean, you would think that he needs his brother's blessing for that sort of thing. The other thing is, he's not shy to kind of spend his brother's money. I mean, remember these art experts who said the reason he cut off his ear was he was worried that his brother wouldn't look after him. Well, here his brother is absent and he's basically feeling pretty entitled to being looked after, doesn't he? The other thing is, you might think if he says, I'm surprised you haven't written to me, that he would just sort of sit in his studio and listen to the branches rattling against the window and the wind blowing and sort of wait, when am I going to hear from Theo? But instead of doing that, he's not thinking, Theo's abandoned me, Theo's forgotten about me, Theo doesn't want to help me, Theo blames me. He's kind of thinking, well, Theo's getting married, I'm going to carry on painting, I'll just put in this order. So really, how does really ring true this idea that Van Gogh couldn't handle his brother getting married? I don't think it had no impact on him, but I also don't think he thought, okay, it's me or her, right? Anyway, let's continue. So he says, I still need, after ordering that, I still need zinc white. And I think this is the quantity. Zinc white, one tube, emerald, 4 of them, cobalt, 3, ultramarine, 1, and then goes on. Then he says, I have 6 studies of the spring, 2 of them big orchids. So this is what he's looking at. It's obviously spring in France. I was actually in France in May 2019, and spring was still springing. I must say now tends to be a time that I travel. I tend to travel kind of in between the seasons, for South Africa, for the Southern Hemisphere, between summer and winter, but for the Northern Hemisphere, between winter and summer. Anyway, so he says, so write me by return mail. It's quite a short letter. I've taken an apartment consisting of 2 little rooms at 6 to 8 francs per month. That's quite cheap, right? Belonging to Monsieur Ray. It is certainly not expensive, but nothing like as nice as the other studio. So at this point, he has actually left the yellow house, quite sad. And that's the answer to the quiz. Before he went to the yellow house, he went to this apartment. And I think he was really there for maybe 2 weeks. I'm just trying to think if it's 2 weeks, maximum 1 month. Right? And I must say, I didn't know that myself. I didn't read every single letter when I wrote Van Gogh, when I wrote The Murder of Vincent van Gogh. So this is something I actually didn't know. And so I see it's also something you guys didn't know. So let's have a look. If you're voting now, it's a little bit too late. But there are 12 votes. Still, most of you saying what I thought, that he went straight to the asylum of Saint-Remy. Incorrect. He stayed in Monsieur Ray's apartment for some time. See how we can learn something. We can learn something that we thought was obvious. We can expand our minds if we pay attention. Okay, Zircon, thanks for joining me. A couple of you saying, I didn't know that. Well, now you do. Now you can educate other people. But before I could manage the move or send you some canvases, I had to pay the other proprietor. So I guess that's the yellow house landlord. And that is why I have been more or less surprised at your not sending me anything, but no matter. Hoping again that everything to do with your marriage has gone off to your liking, and wishing you and your wife much happiness from the bottom of my heart. Now, that's a slightly different sentiment. It's almost like he's just talking in cliches. It's a slightly different sentiment to what he said to Paul Signac, where he said, without denying the least bit in the world the advantages of marriages once it has been contracted, and he talks about the obsequial pomp of the reception, lamentable congratulations. Mustn't one pity the poor wretch who is obliged, after having provided himself with the necessary documents? He is married alive at a slow fire of receptions. So, he does, in a way, sneer at the idea of marriage to Paul Signac, but to his brother he says, much happiness from the bottom of my heart. Right? And, I think in a way that kind of ambivalence, if that's the word, is kind of justified, because in a way he's got to defend himself why he's not married. And in a way, I think he's genuinely supportive of his brother, but I think existentially he feels a little outdone. Remember, it's his younger brother getting married. And so I think he feels a little snubbed, or not snubbed, but his ego is probably affected somewhat. That's correct. Yeah, it is a pity. And maybe that's also why he's holier than thou about marriages, because he's not actually invited to his brother's wedding. I don't think his brother didn't invite him in a real sense, just that he wasn't really available. He was far away. He was in a bad place, and in a sense, he was sort of in the custody of certain people, and possibly even in a legal snare, right? Yeah, that's well put. That's well put. Okay, so he signs off. As I said, it's not a long letter. He says, Signac asked me to join him at Cassis, but seeing that we have enough expenses without that, whatever I do or whatever you do, it was unthinkable. So he actually gets an invitation from Cassis to join him, and you can imagine that He's feeling very low, feeling very lonely, feeling very in need of company, and I was actually got to turn down a very rare invitation, and he probably feels very blue about this. If only he could take up the offer. Okay, so he goes on to say, colors braid, coarser grained in large tubes, like the large tubes of flake white and zinc white. And then he says he wants all these paints: ultramarine 1, malachite green 6, emerald green 6, vermilion 6, chrome 1, citron 6, and so on. And so kind of not a particularly friendly letter from Vincent to his brother. This letter is basically just ordering paints and a few sort of kind of default congratulations to his brother. It's kind of very matter of fact in a way. And now this is a really interesting letter from the Reverend Souls to Theo on the 19th. And then after that, we're going to deal with this letter and then the reply from Theo. Right? So we're going to deal with three more letters. Okay, so all 19th April 1889. Dear Sir, so this is from the Reverend. So you can imagine he's not going to give us, he's going to appraise the situation and give Theo really the real deal. Like, what is going on with your brother? Where is he? What's the situation? How do the villagers feel about him, right? So this is what he says. Dear Sir, I've not written to you for some time because I suppose that your brother has informed you of his situation. He is infinitely better, and I think this is quite an important question. Has Vincent informed Theo of his situation? And, another way of asking that question is, has he informed him of the whole situation? Has he been 100% truthful or not? Well, we're going to find out now. He says, he is infinitely better, as you can judge from his letters. Sometimes it would seem that he has no trace of the trouble that affected him so acutely. He had decided that he would leave the hospice after he found a suitable apartment. So, if you think about it, right before he goes to the asylum, he actually goes from the yellow house somewhere else, which kind of puts a totally different spin on him being insane. And like, he cuts off his ear and then basically goes to the asylum. No, he cuts off, let's say he cuts off his ear. I don't believe he did, but let's say he did. He cuts off his ear, is in the yellow house, leaves the yellow house and stays somewhere else, but then that part's unsuccessful. And then based on that unsuccessful thing, you must bear in mind, when he leaves the yellow house, that's got to hurt him. That's got to cut. Where he's thinking, well, all the effort I put into the yellow house, all the happy times we had in the yellow house, that's gone. I'm now going to start freaking from scratch, decorating this place, trying to get the studio going, and he's probably thinking that it's hopeless. There's no way that he can turn this other apartment, this dump, into a studio. And so he's probably feeling really, really, really low. And then what happens? What happens after he moves into the apartment and he feels really, really low? I think he realizes the scale of his loss. Anyway, he says he had decided that he would leave the hospice and find a suitable apartment. I looked for him and with him, and he was about to sign with the proprietor when all of a sudden he made me the confession that he didn't have the courage at present to take possession of himself, and that it would agree infinitely better with him, that it would be wiser for him to spend 2 or 3 months in a nursing home. So there you have a massive kind of epiphany. You have a massive shift in what we know about him, where he basically says, I can't do this. In other words, he has been struggling with the aftermath of the ear incident. So the ear incident happened in late December, right? And so January, February, March, mid-April, for 3.5 months, he's kind of been struggling to come to terms with everything. You know, he's lost his ear, he's lost his house, he's lost his friend, he's lost the studio, he's lost all the momentum of his work, he's lost the chance to exhibit in Paris, he's lost Theo in a way, is Rulana's left. I mean, it couldn't be more devastating than what it is. And so in this process where he's got to pick himself up and move into this other apartment, he basically realizes, I can't do this. And there's a scene in the movie, one of the Lord of the Rings movies, where Frodo says something like, I can't do this, Sam. Right. And he basically gives up. He basically says, I just can't do this anymore. And then Sam basically talks him back into it. Sam says, you know, this is a world worth saving, and etc., etc. But you can kind of understand that at this point, you know, actually what's been going on is he's been putting up a brave face and trying to transcend disaster alone and with everybody against him. And he reaches the point after 3.5 months with his brother in this wonderful place. You know, he's getting married, he's happy, where he basically just feels kind of spiritually bankrupt. He basically just feels empty, and he feels like, I can't do this anymore. And you know, if you think about it, he has been swimming against the tide, painting without selling anything, painting without people understanding what he's doing, working without earning anything. You know, and he's like constantly alone, and then within that situation, for this multifaceted disaster to befall him, so that in terms of he loses his ear, his friend leaves, his brother kind of I won't say forgets about him, but kind of abandons him. His brother kind of, and you can kind of understand how it's not personal. Anyone who's getting married isn't going to be paying 100% the same amount of attention to the people around them as they normally do. When you get married, you need to particularly spend time with people, you need to make arrangements, you need to make preparations, you need to, you know, and so you would expect the bond between the two brothers to certainly fray a little bit because of a few different things, because of the distance, because of his brother's commitments. And the point is, it comes at a cost to Vincent, and now it's finally coming to light. And it's coming via this Monsieur Soul, sorry, Reverend Souls. He's basically telling Theo, your brother has kind of given up. Vincent doesn't tell his brother, I give up. The Reverend conveys that message. And so it does give you a sense that of how stoic Vincent actually is, how in his letters he is kind of, I won't say telling his brother what he wants to hear, but he's certainly not telling him everything. He's not telling him just how dire the situation is. He's trying to be as honest as he can, but he's, like Gabby Petito, also trying to keep the adventure going, and it ends up being at great cost, right? Do you see that? So let's go back to the letter. So he says, he didn't have the courage at present to take possession of himself, and he thought it would be wiser to spend 3 months in a nursing home. He is entirely conscious of his condition and talks to me of what he has been through and which he fears may return, with a candor and simplicity which is touching. So even this Reverend is actually moved by Van Gogh. You know, you can imagine he's a French dude, is in a way trying to manage the situation, the villagers are up in arms. The villagers are hysterical. The villagers want him gone. And he's actually finding, wow, this guy's actually quite an unusual person. He's actually quite not a nice guy, but a interesting, unusual, and surprising person to him. And so he also says that, and so this is the part that's also interesting, is he, in his opinion, he says Vincent is totally conscious of his condition. In other words, he is self-aware to know what is going on with him. And so, excuse me, how does that make somebody mad? Like, how are you crazy or insane if you entirely conscious of your condition? You know, again, it's the myth of the mad artist. People who are acting crazy don't know that they're crazy. And, you know, earlier today I was watching A Beautiful Mind. And when John Nash is first confronted that he's got paranoid schizophrenia, he doesn't believe it. And for quite a long period, he doesn't believe it until things get to such a low ebb. And his wife says to him, why don't you solve this problem the way you would solve a mathematical problem, with logic? And then he realizes one of the visions he's seeing, that the little girl never gets older. When she runs between pigeons on the ground, they don't fly away. And so he starts to think critically about his own delusions, and that's how he kind of works his way through it. And so only after that does he become entirely conscious of his condition. And so you can't say someone is mad or insane if they know what is going on with themselves, if they're self-aware. Okay. And so this is what he says: I am not capable. He told me the day before yesterday. He says, I'm not capable of looking after myself and control myself. I feel quite different from what I used to be. So look at what he's saying. He's saying, number one, I can't look after myself. And he's saying, I can't control myself. Right? And if you think about that, what is he actually saying? So it seems like he's saying, I don't know how to eat properly and sleep properly, right? I can't do those basic things. And maybe when he's speaking about control himself, maybe he means if he drinks, he can't control it. Maybe he means when he goes to a brothel, like if he doesn't go to a brothel and then he does go to a brothel, when he does, he can't control himself. And maybe this time that he spent with Gauguin kind of unleashed the Van Gogh monster, the one who drinks and womanizes, and he couldn't kind of come back from that. He couldn't sober up, in a way. And now he basically says, I can't look after myself. I can't control myself. And he's now totally laid bare by that, right? It's quite an astonishing revelation. What is Robbie Robbins says, a real friend is one who walks in when the rest of the world walks out. Well said. Yeah, well said. Okay, let's continue. So this is quite an extraordinary letter. It's giving us kind of, it's enlightening us on the true situation in a way that we don't really get very often. In view of this, there was no reason to look for an apartment, and we have given up all attempts in this respect. He has therefore requested me to obtain the necessary information in order that he may be admitted somewhere, and also write to you in this sense. Considering this decision taken after mature deliberation, I thought that before turning to you, I would obtain some information regarding a private institution outside the gates of All at Saint-Remy. So this is the first time it comes up, where it appears that the inmates, and isn't that a word that should put a chill in your heart? I mean, it's a place that is a little bit like a prison, right? It is a little bit like a prison where people are very well treated. I send you the reply, which I have received, in the prospectus that came with it. I am, as always, at your entire service, and you can use me freely. I must add that those who know your brother, notably the physicians, approve this decision and consider it very wise, considering the state of isolation your brother would be in after he leaves. Now, there you have it in blue and yellow, black and white, I guess. But there you have it. What is the major reason that Van Gogh is in such a terrible, terrible state? What is the major reason that Van Gogh is in such a terrible, miserable, horrible state? What is the real thing driving all of this? Well, I think you guys have actually answered it. See what you guys say. What is the thing that is really driving all of this? Ann Thompson says no money. It's a factor, but it's not the factor. There you have it. Robbie Robbins, 100% right. He's so alone, right? Loneliness. His loneliness is driving, really, in a way, driving him crazy. No matter what he does, he ends up alone, right? Think about it. No matter where he is and no matter what he does, he somehow ends up alone. And you do you remember how desperate he was for Gauguin to join him in all? You know, he was writing letters to him constantly. He was obsessively painting the Yellow House, and you know, he was like he was getting himself into a state, right? Then Gauguin comes to him, right? And then there's this sort of honeymoon period. There's this really, the sort of enjoyable period, and then it sort of wears off, and they start having these arguments. And then for quite a long period, Vincent stops writing to his brother, and then it all ends in tears. And Vincent is far worse off afterwards. He sort of feels when Gauguin leaves and he's 1 year less, Vincent feels totally betrayed and totally devastated by this situation. Who wouldn't be? I mean, even if you were a sort of an ordinary person and someone just came, you know, you decorated your home or whatever, and someone came and then stayed for 2 months and then left, you'd probably be a little put out. But even more so if at the time that they left, you also lost your ear. And I can kind of what's the word? I can kind of identify with that a little bit, in the sense of a couple of years ago, I prepared an office for a friend of mine who was a graphic designer, and then she was gonna work for me, but in this office. And so I bought a computer, I had it all kitted out, I ordered furniture, I was going to pay her a salary that I wouldn't say I couldn't afford, but it was definitely a very a high salary that I don't think she really deserved. But I thought maybe she can rise to the occasion. And 2 weeks later, she was gone. She said that she's not really into true crime. She I don't know, like there were things that really annoyed me. Like she would she would be at her desk, and if I came into the office, she'd have her phone in front of her, and I'd say, "What's going on?" She'd say, "I just need to quickly do this for another client." And I sort of felt that, I'm not paying you to do that. And I think she resented being told, well, why can't I look at my phone or whatever. But the point being, I really felt betrayed by the amount of time and money I'd invested in getting this office up and running, and then she just came, didn't really suit her, and then she left. And she was supposed to do graphic design and social media. It turned out she couldn't do social media. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is, I can understand that feeling where you prepare something and you invest and you put some of your own effort. I mean, I put some of I ordered the furniture, and I kind of screwed it together and kind of put it all in place. And then when you look again, that person's gone. And there was one particular weekend where it was a 3-day holiday. She still told me, "Do you know Friday is a holiday?" And I said, "No, I didn't know." So I said, "Okay, well, you don't need to work on Friday." So she took a 3-day weekend, whereas I worked the entire weekend. When she came back on the Monday, I said, how's it going? She said, "Oh, I'm so tired." And I had worked the whole weekend and I was ready to work. And so, but the same kind of thing happened. We were friends for quite a long time before that. Not like good friends, just sort of maybe acquaintance is the better word. And then she came and tried to do work, and anyway, and now we're actually not friends anymore. Like, I was very put off by what had happened, and maybe she was as well. But the person who really lost out was me. I mean, I paid the price for trusting her and what's the word? Giving her a chance. And I mean, when I gave her the job, she didn't have a job. So it was like I don't know. What's that saying? Never a good deed goes unpunished. So what I'm trying to say is that was quite a nasty thing that I went through, but I didn't lose my ear. Nobody cut off my nose, right? And everything else around me was the same. I'm simply saying, in a situation like that where you spend your own money and time and effort, and then someone just comes and goes in what feels extremely selfish, is quite depressing and is quite devastating. Yeah, there it is. Anyway, let's continue. So he goes on to say, at present, his furniture has been stored at a neighbor's, to whom your brother paid 3 months' rent for this purpose, 18 francs in all. And now I will leave you to your reflections. Nothing can be done without your direct intervention. You would not believe how much your brother is preoccupied and grieved with the idea of giving you problems. My brother, he told me, who has always done so much for me, and now to create more cares for him. And doesn't that ring true? He doesn't want to burden Theo with crap. And think about the ear incident. Do you really think Vincent, let's say Gauguin had cut off his ear, do you really think Vincent would want to say, "Theo, Gauguin, your client, cut off my ear and you need to take him to court and whatever"? No, he doesn't want to create crap for his brother. The same thing when he was shot in Auvers-sur-Oise. He doesn't want to create this big drama. He wants it to be, he wants to minimize it. And that's, I think, a very important way to understand Vincent, is that in minimizing what is going on, just like Gabby Petito did, in a way, is not being completely honest with just how bad things are, right? There you have it. My brother told my brother, he told me, who has always done so much for me, and now create more cares for him. So you can see how these art people who think that they know Vincent van Gogh, and they say, well, he cut off his ear because he was worried that Theo would uh, drop him or dump him. That's not kind of what's going on at all. What's going on is Vincent doesn't want to create any drama for his brother. He knows his brother's not going to let him down, and his brother doesn't let him down, right? Okay, so let's go on to the next letter. I think we're going to just do 2 more letters. So this is from Vincent to Theo. It's written 2 days after that letter. We're going a little bit into the future in terms of chronological time. So 2 days after this really, really important letter. And I mean, it's so important to just bear in mind, you know, when he is talking about being lonely, when he is talking about sorry, let's just go back to that. When what is brought up here is, I'm not capable of looking after myself, right? It's about a month later that he paints Starry Night. Isn't that absolutely incredible? The artist that said these words, I'm not capable, about a month later paints something that basically changes world art history, changes what will happen to art in the rest of the world. This guy who says, I'm not capable, will paint a painting that'll end up in a museum in Manhattan, in a Manhattan skyscraper. The guy who said, I'm not capable. And so it's almost like, if you have that feeling of, I can't do this, that is maybe the beginning of where you start to see who you are and what you can do. In other words, where you recognize your limits, you start to also recognize what you can do. And so again, the sky above Saint-Remy isn't, I think, the magical fairy tale. And this is where I think a lot of people have misinterpreted Starry Night. And it wasn't called Starry Night, by the way. Starry Night sounds like, oh, it's a pretty starry night over a pretty little town. It's called something else. You can see that the stars and the violence of the cosmos are actually reflecting a very disturbed, unsettled, restless, disquieted state of mind. And that is not what people see when they see Starry Night. When people see Starry Night, they see what they want to see. They see magic in the moonlight. They see the sort of fiery life and electricity in the heavens, the sort of divine roiling of the heavens. And it's so beautiful and so magical. Actually, what Van Gogh was painting was a lot darker. He was painting a kind of restless insomnia, right? And so it's just really incredible to think that at the time where he is at his lowest ebb, he was actually in a way at his most powerful, right? If you could just tap into that, right? If you could just tap into that, and if we can just tap into that as well. In other words, in that silent place where you're no longer bullshitting, you're no longer telling a story, you're no longer telling someone else what they want to hear. You basically just reach that point where you realize what your limit is. And it's like a bullshit-free zone. That is where the magic actually happens, where you realize who you really are, and where other people also realize who you really are. So it is quite extraordinary, right? So let's go into the next letter. Oh, the other thing is where he says, You would not believe how much your brother is grieved with the idea of giving you problems. And so that's the other thing that's going on, is Vincent is grieving in a way, is grieving. Like, I think what is going on is he's feeling, I am such a burden to my brother. I've basically fucked up. I'm now in a situation. I'm in this horrible situation where there are going to be all these expenses all over again. I've lost this house. Now I've got to go through all of this again, and I just can't do it to him, and I can't do it to myself, right? And so he's grieving. I think he's grieving a whole bunch of things. I think he's grieving the life the adventure that he saw for himself squandered and lost. He's grieving the loss of Gorgan. He's grieving his own journey, sort of washed up on the beach, shipwrecked on the beach. And he is also grieving that, his brother is sort of trying to reach out to his own happiness, and he can't be with his brother. He can't share in that, right? So it is I think you just can't, you can't deny that anyone in his shoes, any person in Van Gogh's shoes, would be totally overwhelmed by emotions and distraught and in despair if they'd gone through the same things. Anyone would be. Do you guys agree? Okay, let's deal with this letter. So now 2 days later, this is what Vincent himself says of his situation. My dear Theo, you will probably be back in Paris at the moment when this letter arrives. I wish you and your wife a great deal of happiness. Can you imagine what it feels like saying those words when you're in a place of great darkness? Can you imagine what it feels like repeatedly saying, I really wish you the best when you're going through your worst? Thank you very much for your kind letter and for the 100 franc note it contained. Out of the 65 francs which I owe, I've only paid 25 francs to my landlord, having had to pay 3 months' rent in advance for a room which I shan't be living in, but where I've sent my furniture. So that does confirm the details of the Reverend. Now, we do want to be 100% sure that what the Reverend is saying is true. He might be saying a few things for his own purposes, but they certainly do seem true, don't they? They seem to resonate. And so this is one thing that Van Gogh now confirms that we've just heard in the Reverend's letter, that he's rented a room that is just going to have his furniture, and having besides had expenses of 10 francs or so for moving. Then, as my clothes are not in too brilliant a condition, and I've had something new to go out in the street in, I got a suit for 35 francs and spent 4 francs on 6 pairs of socks. So out of the note, I have only a few francs left, and at the end of the month, I must pay the landlord again. They might be kept waiting for a few days. I settled my bill at the hospital today, and there's still almost enough for the rest of the month out of the money I still have on deposit. At the end of the month, I should like to go to the hospital. There you have it. There you have it in his own letter, in his own words. At the end of this month, at the end of April, I'd like to go to the hospital in Saint-Remy or another institution of which Monsieur Soles has told me. Now, you can imagine this is a massive, you may read it and think it's no big deal, but this is a massive step that he's taking. He's saying to his brother, basically, I give up. I'm going to go into an institution and you can basically forget about me. I'll be okay there. I'm going to stop everything. I'm going to basically not stop painting, but I'm going to stop this effort. I'm going to basically go somewhere to pause my life and try and just recover myself. And so he's actually acknowledging it's a little bit like this would be the equivalent of Gabby Petito phoning her mother and saying, I want to come home. I want to be back in the institution of home where I don't really have the freedom to do what I want to do. I'm back in your custody. The adventure's over. I don't really have, in the same way that Vincent is saying, I'm not going to be going to exhibit in Paris. I'm not going to have a artist studio. Gabby is saying, I'm not going to have this adventure. I'm going to give up on the whole social media thing, the blogs, the YouTube channel. I'm going to come home. And the difference here is Vincent can't even go home. He's going to go to a hospital, another hospital that he's not even been to, right? It's the end of a dream, and the end of that dream is a nightmare. Paddy says, was he estranged from his brother? And he sort of was. He had a younger brother, Cor, who went to South Africa. They didn't really talk much. Vincent was sort of regarded by his family as kind of the black sheep. I think almost all families kind of have someone like that. I think he got along with one of his sisters, Wilhelmina, but the other two didn't really care that much for him. Black sheep. Okay, so Tamara says, where can we read Theo's letters to Vincent? Well, that's going to be the next letter. So if you can hold on a second, we'll get to the next letter. Okay. Let's go on. It says, forgive me if I don't go into details and argue the pros and cons of such a step. So yeah, you get a little bit of a hint at the weariness that he's going through. He's not going to tell his brother the reasons why he wants to go to an asylum or why he shouldn't. He says talking about it would be mental torture. In other words, he doesn't even want to review the whole mess. He's just at wit's end, right? Anyway, he goes on to say, it'll be enough, I hope, if I tell you that I feel quite unable to take a new studio and stay there alone. And so there you have it again, is basically saying, I can't handle the loneliness. He says, it'll be enough, I hope, if I tell you that I feel quite unable to take a new studio and to stay there alone, here in Oz or elsewhere. For the moment, it is all the same. I've tried to make up my mind to begin again, but at the moment, it's not possible. And so, the other thing is that his brother is now kind of bonded in love to someone. His brother has found someone. His brother has a mate. His brother has a friend. And I think it just reminds him that he doesn't, that he really is alone in the world, that like in a real sense, he's completely alone in the world, right? And I think he's devastated by that. He's devastated by this feeling of, I am alone in this whole world. I actually don't really I don't have a real friend in this world. The real friend I had was Theo, but Theo has now been sort of overtaken by, marriage. And, he probably thought about it like, Theo, why don't you answer my letters? And then realized, you know what? It's actually the way things are going to be now. Theo is married. I can't expect him to be there for me anymore. And that is also a devastating realization. Do you remember when you were, sorry, let's do it like this. Do you remember when you were a teenager or a young adult and your best friend fell in love with someone and they seemed to drop off the face of the earth? I remember that with my friend Alex and some other friends as well, where, you guys hang out and you do things together and then suddenly they're just gone. and they're like unavailable. And then you call and they don't respond, and you um, try and find where they are, and they're not where you'd expect them to be. And then days become weeks, and when you look again, oh no, this person's met somebody, and you feel like, wow, I guess I'm disposable, or wow, okay, so I guess you found your happily ever after, and now I must go and find mine. But do you know that feeling where it's like that person is just lost? It's like, what I mean is, you've lost them, and in the sense of someone that you know so well and you see them every day, and then suddenly they're just gone, right? That's kind of what he's feeling with Theo. Suddenly Theo's not answering his letters. Suddenly Theo is probably not going to be visiting him. And guess what? Theo never visits him for that entire year that is in Saint-Remy. In order for Vincent to see Theo, Vincent's got to go to Theo. He says, I should be afraid of losing the power to work, which is coming back to me now, by forcing myself and by having all the other responsibilities of a studio on my shoulders besides. So, in a way, the only thing Vincent feels like he's got left, it may be a little bit over dramatic to say, but he feels like the only thing he had, excuse me, the only thing he has that holds meaning, the only thing he has that means anything is his art. And his art is almost like this very, very selfish lover that never gives anything back. He pours his heart and soul into it, but he never really gets anything back out of it. But that's all that he's got. And so that is also like a devastating realization to him. Anyway, so he goes on to say, and temporarily I wish to remain, there it is, I wish to remain shut up, as much for my own peace of mind as for other people's. Now, I don't really like to share too much of my personal life, but when I came back from America, obviously the COVID that I suffered was quite traumatic. There was not like the end of the world, but there was a moment where I actually thought I wasn't going to make it, when I was coughing blood, and I was alone in my hotel room, and I actually thought maybe I need to set up a will. I had an incredible fever. It didn't last very long, but there's certainly that moment that, where you sort of crossed over to the other side. And that is, I think, definitely traumatizing, because you also feel like, in a way, who would know if I died? And I mean, it's a question we can all ask. Who would know if I died? Who would care if I died? Who would even realize if I had died? How long would it take them to know that you had died, kind of thing? But this is the point. When I came back from America, I kind of felt like also kind of shutting myself up. And just then it was a friend of mine's, his kids were getting married. And I don't know why, I just wasn't ready to go to a wedding. And I don't know whether Van Gogh felt the same way, that he would have liked to have gone, but he just wasn't in the place to go. And I actually just saw those friends again this past weekend. And what I'm trying to say is that feeling of staying kind of in your cave, just so that you can gather back some of your resources. It might be psychological, it might be physical, it might be whatever it is, a sense of yourself. It's like, for me, it was also in the context of somebody getting married. It's like, in the middle of your fairy tale, I'm not really having the greatest time of my life. I don't really want to spoil your fairy tale by being there, and also I kind of need to be shut up. Do you know what I mean? And I wonder whether it wasn't the same for him, where he's like, I need to be away from everyone's fairy tale because I just need to kind of recover from something that has happened to me, right? So anyway, he goes on to say, what comforts me a little is that I'm beginning to consider madness as a disease like any other. And this is what your art experts would jump on, where he seems to be saying, um, maybe I'm starting to go mad, right? I don't think that's what's happening. I think anyone who's very, very lonely is going to feel something that feels a bit like madness. Anyone who's very, very lonely is gonna not be in a very good place. Like chronic loneliness, extreme loneliness. And he says, what comforts me is that if you accept the thing as such, whereas during the crises themselves, I thought that everything I imagined was real. So he is having a bit of a problem with reality. He is having a bit of a problem telling the difference between the things he imagines, he sees, and reality. It says, anyway, the fact is that I do not want to think or talk about it. You'll spare me any explanations, but I ask you and Mrs. Souls and Ray to arrange things so that I can go there as a resident boarder at the end of this month or the beginning of May. Beginning again that painter's life I've been living, he admits it, isolated in the studio so often and without any other means of distraction than going to a cafe or a restaurant with all the neighbors criticizing, etc. I can't face it, right? And so what the Reverend has said is absolutely true. So yeah, he says, I can't face it. And how did the Reverend put it? He says, something about capable. I am not capable of looking after myself. And so he puts it in his own words. He says, I can't face it. And what are the things he can't face? He says, I can't face the neighbors criticizing me. I can't face going to a cafe and people chattering about me. I can't face going back to that isolated living environment. He says, I can't face going to live with, he said, what? I can't face it going to live with another person, say another artist. He says, he can't face going to live with another person. Now, let me ask you like a really weird question. What is more likely here? Hey, Stephanie, it's really nice to see you again. Hi. Let me ask you a question. What do you think is more likely here? If he cut off his own ear, is that why he can't face being with another person? Or did somebody else cut off his ear and then there was the aftermath to that and he can't face it because of that? Because he was cruelly betrayed by someone who actually physically hurt him. All I'm saying is, if Gauguin cut off his ear, you can imagine that is also a huge betrayal. It's someone significantly injuring you, which almost led to him bleeding to death, right? That is also something that is very hard to deal with. Gauguin really hurt him and basically gets away with it. Gauguin is the hero and he is the villain in the story. The villagers want to kick him out. You can imagine that's also tremendously depressing. And he's got to be thinking, if Gauguin cut off his ear, he's got to be thinking, but I can't tell Theo because that would add to the crap that Theo's got to go through. Theo's now going to have to prosecute this case. He's going to have to pay for that. He's going to have to get a lawyer. We're going to have an investigation. There's going to be some kind of lawsuit with the artwork and the sales and the deal, between the transactions between Theo and Gauguin. He doesn't really want to involve Theo in that. Okay, so let's continue. So he says, he calls it difficult, very difficult. It's taking too much responsibility on oneself. I dare not even think of it. So let's try 3 months to begin with, and afterwards we shall see. Now one's board ought to be about 80 francs, and I shall do a little painting and drawing without putting such a frenzy into it as a year ago. So in a way, he's thinking about rebuilding. He's thinking about, I need to be somewhere where I don't have to worry about food and furniture and entertaining someone else. I'm going to be taken care of, and I can just focus on painting and kind of rehabilitating myself, get back my peace of mind. If you think about it, it is actually quite a good treatment. Then he says, certainly these last days were sad. Now, remember what I said at the beginning of this. I think that he's struggling a bit with depression. He says, certainly these last days were sad with all the moving, taking away all the furniture. Think what it must be like to not just walk out of the yellow house, but you must take the furniture outside the house. You must take the pictures off the walls, right? Have you ever moved out of somewhere where you didn't want to move out, and you feel very raw? You feel that it's like, it kind of feels like the end of the world. As you take out one thing and another thing, you realize this part of my life is over. Especially if it was a place you wanted to live in and liked living in, and things were going well while you lived there. Everything that you take out of that structure feels like you're dismantling your own fairy tale, and it feels like a kind of a death. You are undoing something that took so long to set up, and no one really even knows maybe that you had this wonderful period there, or that it meant so much to you, and now you are like literally unpacking and dismantling this thing, and you realize, well, this is over. And I know I had a period of that in Johannesburg when I it was the only real job that I had. I mean, I've had quite a few jobs, but it was a proper job for a media company. Like I said, I've had a couple of jobs, but this one was, I don't know. I consider it a, I don't know, just like a proper job in a corporation in South Africa, where you got a pension, and you paid PAYE, which is a kind of a tax, and you get pay slips, and you got your office desk, and you park at underground parking, and you rent a place to be near there, and you've got your friends, and everything is set up, and everything is like this connected tapestry, right? And then ultimately I lost my job. I'd worked there for over 2 years, and I mean, I'm glad now that I did. And I mean, even if I hadn't lost my job, then they were downsizing and whatnot. I think we were a team of about 15 people, and it was eventually reduced to about 3. So anyway, but I remember when I was packing up, thinking exactly that. Wow, this was such a wonderful period of my life, and kind of a secure period. now it's over, and I'm probably going to have to leave Johannesburg, which I ended up doing, and so on and so on. But the part that I think one's also got to remember was I hated my boss. The first thing she said to me when I arrived was, you're not a writer and you cannot write, and you're not going to be writing when you're here. And I mean, that's one of the main reasons I went to work for a media company. And I did end up writing, but for other companies, for other media organizations. And that was ultimately why I got fired. They anyway, long story, but because I'd basically written something, that's why I actually got fired. And I took them to the like a labor court, and I won. So I mean, I did win that thing, but so what I'm trying to say is that fairy tale wasn't all fairy tales, wasn't all moonshine and roses. It was also had a kind of a horrible aspect. But I did live just down the road from my friend Alex. We did have some amazing cycling adventures together. We once cycled from where we were to Sun City. Anyway, I can talk about that a lot. The point is, when that show was done, I kind of knew this is going to be over, and that was where I made the transition from that kind of life to a freelancer. And I didn't know whether I could do it. I didn't know whether you could make a living as a freelancer. And it actually took probably at least 5 years to make a consistent income, maybe even longer than that. But anyway, that was a different kind of life. And one wonders whether Van Gogh, if he couldn't have done something different as well, like started writing for a newspaper or drawing sketches for a newspaper, for magazines. I don't know. But in other words, I adapted. I found myself in a pretty horrible situation, but I adapted. And Van Gogh basically just continued doing what he was doing, continued painting. In a way, thank God he did, because we've now inherited the legacy of his life and his work. But it wasn't really a success from his perspective. Like, from the perspective of being a successful human being, that wasn't really the way of going about it. Just to continue doing what he was doing. Like, if you're selling one painting a year, that's not a success. So he probably should have done something else. Anyway, I don't know if you guys are following what I'm getting at. Okay, so let's continue with the letter. He says, certainly with these last days, with all the moving, taking away all my furniture, packing up the canvases that are going to you. But the thing I felt saddest about, there's that word again, sad, was that you had given me all these things with such brotherly love. There again is confirmation from Reverend Saul's letter that he did feel that he was grieving, that he was feeling so distraught about how much Theo had done for him, and that he didn't want to be more of a burden to him. And he says, I felt saddest about was that you had given me all these things with such brotherly love, and that for so many years you were always the one who supported me, and then to be obliged to come back and tell you this sorry tale. But it's difficult to express it as I felt it. The goodness you have shown me is not lost, because you had it and it remains for you. Even if the material result should be null, it remains for you all the more. But I can't say it as I felt it. And you can kind of get what he's getting at here. This is an incredible relationship between two brothers. One really sacrifices a heck of a lot for the other. The other, and I mean, was Theo right to have faith in his brother? Well, look at the legacy of Vincent van Gogh's art today. There are museums named after him. His art is some of the most valuable in the world. He's one of the most popular and well-known and well-loved artists in the world today. Why is that? Because Theo loved him, because Theo put his faith in him, because Theo stuck by him. And this is a kind of a moment where Theo kind of didn't, but he's going to we're going to hear Theo's response in the next letter. Okay, so he says, think about what he says there. The goodness you have shown me is not lost, because you had it and it remains for you. And think about it, the goodness that Theo showed Vincent isn't lost, because we have it through the letters that his wife kept, and the paintings that his wife kept, and the curatorship that went on from Theo to his wife to us. Anyway, he says, meanwhile, you do understand that if alcohol has undoubtedly been one of the greatest causes of my madness, there you have it. There you have it. I don't think it's just alcohol. I think it's maybe syphilis as well. But there you have him saying he drinks too much. He drinks a lot. And I mean, how do a lot of people deal with loneliness? And that's why I say, isn't the underlying thing here common stock standard meat and potatoes loneliness, right? This guy is really, really lonely. Yes, he would like a girlfriend. Heck, he would just like a friend, right? And that is why is anyone who's really lonely can be very devastated by small things, but even more, he can be devastated by big things. Stephanie says the alcohol may have led to the syphilis. The alcohol may have taken away his inhibitions. The alcohol may have made him appear mad to other people. And there he says, the alcohol is the cause of my madness, meaning, think about it. Someone who's really drunk appears off their rockers sometimes. And isn't that the kind of creature that was trying to attack Gorgan, the kind of creature that was, Gorgan talks about this guy that was coming at him with a razor, right? And maybe Gorgan fended him off with a sword. Maybe Gorgan thought, geez, this sputtering guy with spittle coming out of his mouth, this mad, infuriated Van Gogh, is going to kill me. I've got to hold him back. You know, if I don't kill him, he's going to kill me. But like in the heat of battle, maybe that's what he felt. And as you said, doesn't make sound decisions. But this is the bottom line. Whether it's loneliness or alcohol or syphilis or a combination of those things, none of them are madness. None of them are like, okay, he's actually mad. It's a very normal response to very normal things. And so calling Van Gogh the mad artist is just not accurate. But I maintain what I've said before. You know, if there was a time for Van Gogh to commit suicide, this was it. You know, he'd lost literally everything. So why doesn't he? And instead of doing that, he paints Starry Night, and over a period of about a year, digs himself out of this hole. And so by the summer of the following year, he's really doing well. He visits his brother, his art, he's painting a picture a day. He basically diagnoses himself as feeling cured, basically feeling good, and then he commits suicide. I don't buy it. Now was the time. If he was suicidal, now was the time to do it. But he doesn't. What does he do in this horrible place? He says, "Oh, the right thing for me to do is to go to an asylum." That's what he does. I don't really agree with that statement. He wasn't embittered. He was incredibly stoic for someone who'd gone through the things that he'd gone through. He's not embittered. He's he's actually the kind of person who, in a way, wants to be not a martyr, but like live a fairly hard life, like a peasant. He feels that's appropriate, right? I agree that he is actually a very resilient human being. Anyway, so he goes on to say, It came on very slowly and will go away slowly too, assuming it does go, of course. Or the same thing if it comes from smoking. But I should only hope that this recovery, the frightful superstition of some people on the subject of alcohol, so that they prevail upon themselves never to drink or smoke. We are already ordered not to lie or steal, etc., and not to commit other crimes, great or small, and it would be too complicated if it was absolutely indispensable to have nothing but virtues in the society in which we are very undeniably planted, whether it be good or bad. I assure you that during these queer days when many things seem odd to me because my brain is agitated, yeah, he sounds a lot like Amanda Knox. Through it all, I don't dislike old Pangloss. But you would do me a service by discussing the question frankly with Monsieur Soles and Monsieur Ray. I should think that with an allowance of 75 francs or so a month, there must be a way of interning me so that I should have everything I need. So, even though he is a burden to his brother, and even though he's grieving, and even though he's sorry, he's nevertheless remaining a burden to his brother. He doesn't really say, Theo, I can't ask you for anything more. You know what? I'm a wretch. I don't deserve to live. He doesn't say that. He says, I feel so bad. You were so good to me. I feel so bad. By the way, can you also continue to give me 75 francs a month? And this is where, again, the art experts don't understand the real Van Gogh. Because if the real Van Gogh felt so bad about being a burden to Theo, he wouldn't ask for this. Like if the thought of living and being a burden to Theo was worse, then he wouldn't ask for this. And the same thing happened shortly before he died. He put in a big order of paints with his brother, not a small order, an unusually big order. And so at the same time that he's grieving the burden that he is to his brother, he continues being a burden, but he's trying to be a lighter burden. He's not trying to be not a burden at all, although I think that might be the end game. Chair Bear, good to see you here. Well done. Chelsea says, I wish that I could have met him. Well, maybe you can meet the landscape that he saw, Chelsea. Stephanie says, I love him through his written letters, though I would likely slap him if we met. Very likely. You might also say, sorry, Vincent, I don't want to insult you, but you've been talking the whole time. You've just been talking. Do you mind if I say something? And you might also say, when last did you bath? Nan says, I can see where you might interpret his anguish as embitterment, though. Embitterment is where you have regrets and where you blame people and where you kind of wish for a different outcome. He's not really that way. He's actually incredibly positive and optimistic and resilient despite everything. It was a combination. Theo was giving some of his own money, but some of his inheritance was undoubtedly given to Theo as well. So, that would make him feel a little entitled. So Stephanie's right about that, but it is also, it's not like Theo only gave Vincent his own money. I think he also gave a little bit beyond that, right? Okay. Anyway, so he says, then if it is possible, I'd very much like to be able to go out in the daytime and draw or paint outside. So, he's saying, he's kind of this also shows that he's not totally off his rocker. He's basically saying, you know what? I think this might work for me. So I have to leave the yellow house. Okay, I'll leave the yellow house. I'll go to the asylum and I'll recover, but I don't want to be treated like an inmate. I don't want to be a prisoner. I would like to be guaranteed the right to go out during the day, every day. And so that's exactly what happens. And so this is what shows he's not mad. He recognizes he's not in a great state of mind. He's not forced to go to the asylum. It's presented to him as an idea, and he says, you know what, that does make sense. And so he says, okay, I will go there, but can I be allowed to go out? And he is allowed to go out, which also shows that he's not totally nuts. Otherwise, they wouldn't let him go out. He says, seeing that I go out every day now here and think that this could continue, paying more, I warn you, would make me less happy. The company of other patients, you understand, is not at all disagreeable to me. On the contrary, it distracts me. So I don't know, the feeling I get from that, think about it. The feeling I get from that is in a very pathetic way, in a very way that I think in a way tugs at your heartstrings. You get the idea that when he was in hospital, Vincent met other people, other patients, other sick people, and he felt, you know what, this is company of a sort. I could kind of live with this. I wouldn't mind, this is one way that would solve my loneliness, is being in the company of sick people compared to being in nobody's company. So it was in the hospital, in terms of him losing his ear, that he sort of realized, I'm actually meeting other people around me that are here for whatever reason. And I was thinking, well, if I'm in the asylum, I'm going to have companions as well. And that's going to be a little bit of a distraction from this unendurable loneliness that I've been going through, right? No, he could stay at the asylum for free. Anything else he wanted, if he wanted wine, then that would be paid for by his brother. If he wanted special food, that would also need to be paid for. But the accommodation and I think basic meals were basically paid for. So that's kind of how he's thinking. If you think about it, it's a little bit like the Borinage all over again. He is totally okay with living in a very humble setting, at least where he's allowed to paint, and so that's what he's signing up for. So he says, ordinary food suits me quite well, especially if they gave me a little more wine there, as they do here, usually a half liter instead of a quarter, for instance. So as much as he is grieving and whatever, he's also making his demands. He's saying, okay, I'll go to the asylum, but what I want is to be let out once a day, and I want more wine if I can get. And he's already been saying I shouldn't drink and that alcohol's been a problem. But he's saying, well, you know what, make sure that I get wine when I'm at the asylum. He says, but a private room, if it remains to be seen what the arrangements of the institution like that would be. So he also wants a private room. Mind you, Ray is overburdened with work, overburdened. If he writes to you or souls, better do exactly what they say. After all, we must take our share, my boy, of the diseases of our time. I wonder what reference that is to. What do you think he means by the diseases of our time? In a way, it is only fair, after all, having lived some years in comparatively good health, we should have our share sooner or later. And there he includes Theo. And I mean, Theo had syphilis, if anything, worse than Vincent. As for me, you know well enough that I should not exactly have chosen madness if I had had a choice. But once you have an affliction of that sort, you can't catch it again. And there'll perhaps be the consolation of being able to go on working a bit at painting. How will you manage not to speak too well or too ill of Paris and many other things to your wife? Do you feel in advance that you'll be quite capable of keeping exactly the golden mean all the time and from all points of view? Now, I don't know, that might be a bit cryptic, but I read that to mean, how are you going to not go to brothels and see prostitutes when you're married? That's how I read that. Do you think that that's accurate? He doesn't say it directly, he seems to say it indirectly. He says, how will you manage not to speak too well or too ill of Paris? What do you think he means by Paris? And many other things to your wife. How will you manage not to talk about this or that to your wife? Do you feel in advance that you will be quite capable of keeping exactly the golden mean? What do you think he means by the golden mean? Staying kind of balanced, staying on the straight and narrow, but in terms of being married, right? I still don't think that that he's suffering from embitterment, because he's actually he accepts the situation he's in. Um, I think the I think 99% of people would feel embittered, which is what makes him quite special. Embittered people don't paint and they don't create and they don't. Um, he is actually volunteering to go to this asylum. An embittered person wouldn't want to go to the asylum. They'd say, no, 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 I'm okay. Don't do this to me. You're going to make my life even worse. Well, well, certainly not Vincent's style. The question is it Theo's style? Let's do a quick poll, because um, I feel like there's like a strong sense from some of you of, oh, I can see exactly what Vincent is going through. He is bitter, and that's not at all how I pick it up. I feel like it's a totally different thing. He's broken, he's devastated, he's grieving, he is feeling very raw and unhappy, but he's not bitter about it. So let's do a quick poll. Do you think Vincent is feeling embittered or something else? Again, so I just want to see what was said here. Embitterment is persistent emotion in reaction to injustice. So, he's not blaming. There's not this persistent emotion or reaction. He's not blaming Gorgan. He's not like constantly moaning about the yellow house. Like, I wish I could still stay there. He's basically accepted what's going on and is kind of constructively trying to go to the next thing. He's also not bitter about his brother getting married. He basically says, I wish you well. I'm happy for you. He doesn't really say anything. If anything, when he talks to Signac, he says, well, marriage is a bit of a farce, but that's not being bitter. That is being cynical, I would say. But maybe I'm wrong. Let's do a quick poll. Now, this is not how you would feel. This is, if you've been paying attention, how does Van Gogh feel? And I think maybe one's got to differentiate between how one would obviously feel and how Van Gogh says that he feels, how Van Gogh, Van Gogh communicates, because he doesn't communicate being embittered. In fact, the Reverend doesn't say that either. The Reverend who has appraised him independently doesn't say, wow, your brother won't stop complaining, your brother won't stop blaming, your brother won't stop um, um, reacting to the situation he's in. He's just so sorry. Like, if he's sorry about being a burden to someone, how is that being embittered? If anything, I wouldn't blame him for being embittered towards the villagers who turned against him, but he seems quite, I think he's hurt by that. Um, but I don't really get a sense that he is reacting to that and moaning about that. I think it's a reality that he's had to deal with, but I think he's also like almost he accepts it because he kind of accepts responsibility for what he has done. I don't think it's fair what the villagers did to him, but I think he kind of understands why. So, you know, when the Reverend says he is entirely conscious of his condition and talks to me with candor and simplicity, which is touching. I don't think he's communicating, wow, your brother's really bitter. I don't really get that sense. So let's have a look at some of your comments. I agree that he seems quite stoic, but it's beyond stoic. He seems kind of positive, kind of practical. I agree with that. He was very disappointed. I think what he's going through here is feeling depressed, understandably, is feeling defeated, understandably, is feeling but he's also feeling overwhelmed. He's feeling like, I can't do this anymore. See if I can find that scene from The Lord of the Rings. So I'm probably gonna get a copyright thing for showing this, but maybe I can just show it really briefly, and maybe I can cut it out, because this really conveys that spirit so well. Just a spirit of despair and being overwhelmed.
I can't do this.
Did you hear that? It's this over here. You know, in this scene, what's been building up to this is Frodo's been carrying the ring, carrying this burden, something that he you know, he can't use it, so he can't like use the ring. It's a powerful ring, but he can't use it. It's a little bit like Van Gogh. He's got this art, but somehow he doesn't get the use of it. He has it, but he can't use it, right? And anyway, at a certain point in his journey, Frodo just feels completely overwhelmed, and he says this.
I can't do this.
Right? And the same way that where he says, I can't do this, Sam, Vincent is saying to Theo, I can't do this. He says, I can't face it. And then Sam basically gives him the courage. And the difference between these two is, in the end, Frodo does continue carrying the ring. Thanks to Sam talking, we're going to deal with Theo basically playing the role of Sam and telling him what he should do and why he should do it. So I just want to I'm going to put a link to that in chat, I don't want to play the whole thing, but you guys can listen to it. Let's finish off with this letter. I can't believe we're almost at the 2 hour mark. I really thought this would be a 1 hour thing. Ordinary food. So he wants an ordinary food, private room, daily walkabout, and more wine than he's been getting. Then he says, now he starts signing off. He's asked him about how you're going to live with your wife and keep things balanced. And then he says, I shake your hand in thought. I do not know if I shall write very, very often, because not all my days are clear enough for me to write fairly logically. All your kindness to me seemed greater than ever to me today. That also resonates in the Reverend's letter. I can't put the way I feel it in words, but I assure you that this kindness has been pure gold. And if you do not see any results from it, my dear brother, don't fret about it. Your own goodness abides. So, in a way, I get the feeling that, in the same way that Van Gogh lost the yellow house, this sanctuary, this place that was his, it was the only home that he ever knew in his whole life. It's a place that he chose, a place that he decorated, a place that he inhabited, a place where a friend of his came to stay. In the same way that he's lost that, I think he also feels a simultaneous loss of his brother. He's not losing Theo, but in a very real sense, things are never going to be the same with Theo ever again. They're never going to have the close relationship where Theo's main pal in life, where Theo's main concern in life is going to be Vincent. Now it's going to be secondary to his wife and child. So Vincent's now keenly aware of that. And it's interesting that he says, you are pure gold. And the yellow house was like pure gold. It was like a pure gold little block in all that Van Gogh lived inside. Isn't there a song, something about Boney M, Heart of Gold? Anyway, so he goes on to say, only transfer this affection to your wife as much as possible. And if we correspond somewhat less, you will see that if she is what I think her, she will comfort you. That is what I hope. Ray is a very nice fellow, tremendous worker, always on the job. What men the modern doctors are. If you see Gauguin or write to him, remember me to him. I shall be very glad, again, if he was embittered, I think he would say, if you see Gauguin, tell him what a arsehole he is. It would be like that. If you see Gauguin, ask him why he left me, and tell him my problems persist. Thank you very much. If he was embittered. I shall be very glad to hear any news you can give me of our mother and sister, and if they are well, tell them to look upon this affair of mine, as nothing to be inordinately distressed about. Is in a way doing a bit of damage control, saying, tell them that I'm okay. Tell them that it's not a scandal, and of course this gives you a very good idea that he doesn't want to be a burden to them, but he's not really telling the truth. If you think about it, if you had a relative that is kind of giving up on their lives and saying, look, I need to stop drinking. I can't really face life. I'm going to go and check into an asylum, maybe for 3 months, maybe for a whole year. Can you send me some wine? That would be of concern to a family member. It's like, wow, don't you rather want to come stay with me? He says, I may be comparatively unfortunate. So he's basically turning this whole thing in. Maybe I just had a bad day. Maybe I was a bit unlucky. But after all, in spite of all that, I may still have some almost normal years before me. Well, Vincent has 1 year really left. Basically a year and about 2 or 3 months. It is a disease like any other. Well, he's right about that. And now almost everyone we know among our friends has something the matter with him. Well, that tells you quite a lot, doesn't it? That tells you quite a lot about what he knows about what's going on. So, is it really worth talking about? I'm sorry to give trouble to Monsieur Souls and Ray, and above all to you too, but what is one to do? My head isn't steady enough to begin again as before. So, he's basically saying, I can't start again from scratch. And, I must say, I feel like I've been quite indulgent in this particular live stream, but I'm going to indulge one more time. Um, I had a dream, and that was to take part in the uh, Ironman World Championship in Hawaii. And in the beginning, I felt like I couldn't pursue it because I simply couldn't afford it. But when I was living in South Korea, I found that I could afford it, and I started buying the equipment that I needed. And then I started training, and then I really started pursuing the dream. And then I trained pretty hard, and then I trained these sort of infernal. I was doing some workouts of 150 kilometers a session, training like anything, and then something like a month or two before the event, I'd get extremely sick, or I'd catch a cold, or I would just um, overtrain and not recover. And so I trained for an Ironman, got sick, couldn't take part, and then I did it again. Except the second time was a little bit more serious. Not only did I get sick, but they cancelled the swim, and I got a bloody ear. I burst my eardrum, and then I actually started that race. Sorry, they didn't cancel the swim. Um, there was one that they cancelled the swim, so this must have been the third one. Anyway, and then I pulled out on the bike after 100 kilometers on the bike. I pulled out just because I felt incredibly weak. I just couldn't. I just felt very like when you eat an apple and you leave it on the counter and it turns brown. I felt like that. So I'd obviously overtrained the second time. And so I felt the same way. I felt like I just can't summon the resources to train for an Ironman again. And, if I train for an Ironman again and I get sick again, I don't know what's going to happen. I might have a mental breakdown. And so I actually did that. I trained for the third time, and I actually did get sick a third time, but fortunately, with enough time to recover from the sickness, and then I did eventually take part. I got strep throat in January, I think, and then the Ironman was like 3 months later, and I was actually able to do it. But what I'm trying to say is, I know that feeling where you empty yourself out completely. You're passionate, you're inspired, you're energized, but you put all of that out there, but then you've got nothing to show for it, which is what the first Ironman was. You trained, but you couldn't actually deliver. And then I did it again. And so I know that feeling that he has. I just can't start over again. And because you kind of have this feeling of, if I do all of this and I fail again, I'm gonna just be destroyed. I'm just gonna fall into like a lot of powder or something like that. Um, and of course you're not, but it feels like that. And so that's what he's getting at. He says, my head isn't steady enough to begin again as before. So he's obviously burnt a whole lot of psychological candles, psychological matches. He just doesn't have those resources anymore. But it actually shows you, as much as he doesn't have those resources, he's still an incredibly resilient person. You can go into an asylum, and that's where he painted Starry Night. That's resilience. Isn't like going to the asylum fold his arms and drink wine for a year, he produces really good art, including Starry Night. He painted Starry Night in the asylum. After all of this, after saying, I can't do this again. That's at the beginning of that period, that's when he paints Starry Night. He says, the important thing is not to cause any more scenes in public. And isn't that what happened when he was shot? He didn't want to cause a scene. He didn't want to say, this is what happened. I made a move on Geshe's daughter, and he pulled out a gun, and he needs to be arrested. He doesn't want to make a scene. He doesn't want to talk about it. That's exactly what he's getting at. And naturally, being a little calmer now, I distinctly feel that I was mentally and physically in an unhealthy condition. And then people have been kind, those I remember. And as for the others, after all I caused, so I think he's talking here about the villages. And here he basically is very conciliatory. He says, after all, I caused some uneasiness. And if I'd been in a normal condition, things would never have happened the way that I did. So he kind of is taking responsibility. That's why he's definitely not embittered. If you know him, he's not embittered. And then he says, goodbye, write when you can. And so we're going to deal with Theo's response, which came 3 days after this very poignant letter. Stephanie says, I wish his work was recognized before he died. I wish my work was recognized as well. I'm talking about my writing work. So Stephanie has put a link to my book in chat. Thanks so much for that, Stephanie. Someone says third time's a charm. And that is exactly what I did. I started a website because I thought I've got to do something different to get through this. And so I started a website titled 3x Luck, meaning third time lucky. And so I blogged my Ironman journey, and then I did the Ironman. But that blogs, would every time I did a workout, I would blog it, and I would blog things that interested me in terms of sport and what other people were doing, and that kind of made it interesting. And people would leave comments, how's the training going, and well done with that, and so on. And so that was kind of how I made that third journey meaningful and different. Yeah, but I think if you are recognized, then first of all, you're recognized by your peers, right? By peers, I mean, like in the YouTube community, by other creators. I think you are recognized by journalists. I think you are, I don't know. And anyway, none of that is really the case. I think your discoveries are acknowledged, and you know what I mean, like the things, the insights that you've mentioned in certain cases, and the various psychologies that you've constructed, like I did in terms of the link between the levels of sadism and the levels of anality. You might say, well, that's not new, but it certainly is new in the true crime space, linking criminal sadism to the psychology that went before that and how anal someone's upbringing was. That I think is very new. It's not new in terms of anthropology or basic psychology, but it is new in terms of applying it in that area, and specifically, let's say, to mass shooters, right? I did I did receive my YouTube plaque, but that's not quite what I'm talking about. But I must say, when I see statements like that, and um, Laurie in Myrtle Beach, it's one thing for someone to say that. I can kind of shrug my shoulders and say, I think you're being a little, I think you overstating things. But when I met Laurie in person and she told me things, and then her partner told me these other things, and I sort of realized, wow, my writing actually changed this person's life and helped them in this situation, helped them in that situation. um, I couldn't help feeling that if that's all my work has ever done, just change one person's life, but in such a fundamental way and in so many other ways, then I have actually brought good into this world, and it is worth something, and that really did mean something to me. So yeah. um, Thanks, Stephanie. You always put a smile on my face. I think before we get to um, the next letter, I want to share some images with you guys. You may have seen some of these, maybe you haven't. So, so that is the actual painting. It's an actual Van Gogh. It's called Drawbridge, just painted in May 1888. This is when he was on a roll before Gauguin arrived, right? This is the sort of thing he was painting. And that roll that he was on, that momentum would only improve. And so when you're in the gallery, you see things like this. I don't know if you guys remember we've covered Van Gogh letters, and then you see in the web exhibits archive various pictures, and the color's not right. Here's the original painting, and look how beautiful it actually is. I don't know if you guys remember what it looked like on web exhibits, but it kind of looks very plain and looks very drab. Well, the original actually looks quite special. And if you think about it, what makes Van Gogh so um, compelling as an artist, I've spoken about it before, was because he emerged during the advent of photography. He had to differentiate himself from black and white photos, and boy, did he. He did that through color. He did that through imbuing his work with this electric, almost animated um, realism, but with also with more color than there even is in real life. Have you sometimes put on polarized glasses, and then it enhances the blues and enhances the greens? That's kind of what Van Gogh did. And it kind of seems to show an electrified landscape, a living planet around us, doesn't it? So there is a sketch that Gauguin did that you actually see in not sure if it's the Met. I think it's the Met. So this was a visit I did to the Met, not with um, Connecticut Stephanie, but with another Stephanie. And so there you have it. There's a original Paul Gauguin sketch with some woman. You can see this is a very different Gauguin to the one who sketched half-naked Polynesian girls on a tropical island. Like this is, you can almost imagine this is the last place he wants to be. That is the Met, isn't it? Or is it MoMA? Chelsea, you've been to both, I presume. I actually can't remember. I'm just trying to think. Okay, so let's go. That is actually a painting of the asylum. That one over there. As far as I can remember, it's a painting of a window in the asylum. There again, you can just see and appreciate how vivid his colors are. This was October 1889. So this is what he painted later. Just think about it. The same year that he's going through these terrible travails, right? Basically, let's just have a look. It's May, June, July, August, September. About 6 months after this excruciating letter that he sends to his brother, he paints this picture. Isn't it beautiful? And I must say, these rocks in the foreground actually look like books, don't they? But there is still quite a lot of feeling and emotion in these skies, isn't there? Wow, thanks a lot, Yvonne. Yvonne says, we love to see what you see through your kaleidoscope. It's enriching, and you are creating your legacy even now. Let's see what happens. Okay, let's see what happens. Thanks a lot for that. I appreciate it. Okay, so now I'm a little bit embarrassed to show this picture, but here it is. That's me in front of the original Starry Night. I don't think I'd had a lot of sleep. But again, this is actually a very misunderstood painting. Anyway, so I've got a couple of other pictures I want to share. Let's see if I can find them. Okay, and this just gives you a sense of his brush strokes. And the thing that surprised me so much was how much of the underlying canvas, despite this impasto, there are nevertheless these little pieces underneath that are untouched, there and there and there. You know, like from a distance, this looks like very, very thick paint. And then it turns out that there's no paint over there. That's bare canvas. There are little pieces of bare canvas there and there and there and there. And in the middle of this thick yellow over there. You know, almost 10% of this is bare canvas, maybe it's about 5%. Look at all of this. That's the bare canvas, bare canvas. And although it's so yeah, you also get another view of where it's bare. But what it does is it creates kind of a texture. Some of these thick strokes leave behind small shadows, small darkish shadows, which creates a texture of its own. Now look at this. Look how thick that is. And here I don't think there is any bare canvas. Theo must have sent a big supply. One wonders whether he didn't paint the whole canvas so that he would have enough paint for the next canvas. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. I don't think his eyesight was failing. I think that's his technique. I mean, he was only 35. So I think Stephanie from Manhattan took this picture. But this gives you an idea. It's not a very big painting. But again, haven't people misinterpreted Starry Night? It's actually showing Van Gogh's disquiet. Is showing his mental state in a way, right? And there's a totally different artist with a totally different attitude to the canvas, far more calm, far more what's the word? Almost serene. I've always liked Claude Monet. I've always really liked Monet. Although I'm not actually sure. Isn't that Manet? Is that Monet or Manet? I think it's Monet because I don't think there's a Claude Manet. Manet's name wasn't Claude, as far as I know. Let me just make sure. Yeah, the other Manet's name is Edouard, so that is a Monet. Okay. Okay, so are you guys ready to deal with the Theo's response? So Theo's now a married man, is now back in Paris, and he's now read his brother's letter. Let's see what he says. My dear Theo, oh, hold on. Sorry, this is another letter from Vincent to Theo, and then there's the response on the 24th. So he says, my dear Theo, I've seen Monsieur Sauls again, and he said that he has written to you. I think that this will be for the best, and I see no other way. The power of thought is coming back to me gradually, but I'm less able to manage practical things. So he's acknowledging that he's compromised. He says, I am absent-minded and could not direct my own life just now. What an admission. I can't direct my own life right now. I can't look after myself. I'm absent-minded. But let's leave that alone as much as possible. How are things going? Are you back? I must tell you that I think you may find Monsieur Saul's letter still addressed to Rue Lepic. How are things at home? I think Mother must have been pleased. Just think about what a long period this has been. Like Vincent's in a really horrible state. And day after day after day, and there's just silence from Theo. It's not deliberate. It's just that Theo's somewhere else, literally, but also, his heart is somewhere else. Day after day is going by. And so Vincent writes another letter. He says, above all, do not imagine that I'm unhappy. Well, I don't know. I think he is unhappy. So why does he say that? He's trying to find the appropriate way of reaching his brother, I guess. So then he says, I feel deeply that this has been at work within me for a very long time already, and that other people seeing symptoms of mental derangement have naturally had apprehensions better founded than my unfounded certainty. And what is incredible is how succinct he is in describing his madness. I mean, it reminds me of Virginia Woolf in a suicide note saying, you know what, I can't think properly. And yet her note is so well written, so well executed. Kind of have the same thing here. He says, I've naturally had apprehensions better founded than my unfounded certainty that I was thinking normally, which is not the case. So that has much softened many of the judgments which I've too often passed with more or less presumption on people who nevertheless were wishing me well. Anyhow, it is certainly a pity that with me, these reflections reach the stage of feeling rather late. Now, I must say, isn't he an excellent writer? He expresses himself with sophistication. If anything, how many people do you know that can write with this level of eloquence in the 21st century? And I mean, he's not trying to write a book. He's writing a letter to his brother. Look how eloquent it is. Look how succinct he is in what he says. He says, "But I want you to think all that over and to consider the step we are taking now, just as I spoke of it to Monsieur Souls, this going to into an asylum as purely a formality. And in any case, the repeated attacks seem to me to have been serious enough to leave no room for hesitation." And so that's certainly something one's got to think about, is that he does have repeated attacks of something. Is it associated with syphilis? Is it associated with epilepsy? Is it associated with anxiety, like panic attacks? Is it associated with delusion or something else? Then he says, "Besides, as to my future, it is not as if we were 20, since I've turned 36. And poor Vincent, not even his brother has wished him happy birthday." This is the first time that it's kind of been acknowledged that he has had a birthday. Really, I think it would be torture for other people as well as for myself if I were to leave the hospital, for I feel and am, as it were, paralyzed when it comes to acting and shifting for myself. Again, this is really, we're really on the brink of him painting Starry Night. Look how he's feeling. He's feeling helpless. Look how he's feeling paralyzed. Is really at one of the lowest points in his entire life when he paints this incredible masterpiece. Later on, well, let's wait and see. I would like to ask you loads of things about Holland and about these days. Poor egoist that I've always been and still am. That's how he sees himself, a poor egoist. I can't get the idea out of my head, although I've already explained it to you 2 or 3 times, that it is really for the best if I go into an asylum immediately. You know, the amazing thing about this, and it's quite heartbreaking, is that he is pitching to his brother, I need to go to an asylum, right? He is selling the idea to his brother that that's where he needs to go. Not that he should go home, his home being, I guess, Theo's home, but that he should go to an asylum. It's not like people have got to convince him. It's like he's convincing his brother, which is somehow even more tragic. That is definitely true. By the way, Chelsea, how is the story of an African farm? I mean, I think when you last told me about it, it seemed like you were 10 chapters into it. Have you finished it? How is that book going? I must say, for those of you who don't know, and what did you think? What's your review of it? Was it meaningful? Was it disappointing? Was it so? What were your thoughts? I read a really good book called Solitaire, and it's been a long time since I read a book 100 pages in a night, but that's definitely one. Wow, page turner. That's good to hear. I'm really pleased that I recommended a book and it was something that you found really interesting. It's good to hear. Okay, so he says things may come out perhaps in the long run. Things may come out right perhaps in the long run. Anyway, my very poor excuse is that painting narrows your ideas about other things. Perhaps you cannot be doing your work and think of other things at the same time. I must say, I feel that. I feel, you know, right now I'm trying to improve my fitness, improve my health. And I find when I do that, my channel suffers, and vice versa. When my channel does well, my health suffers, and I can't get any sleep, and so on. Um, and he is such a focused person, and he's so committed to his art that I think he's realized there's a world beyond the world that he knows, and obviously there is. But what he's trying to get at is he's been so um, focused, so fixated on what he's been doing with his art that in a way the world, the real world, has kind of passed him by, and he's kind of been awakened to that reality. He's been awakened to the fact that he's become quite dysfunctional. He can't look after himself, that there are people around him that have been realistically looking at him and saying, wow, this guy, we don't actually want this guy around us. He's whatever. And he's sort of realized, wow, I think I've forgotten about a dimension of reality. And that's kind of costing him quite dearly. And that is the price of anything. You might have someone like Steve Jobs or Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or anyone who works very hard. It means they've got to commit to something, they've got to focus on something. Meanwhile, other things are happening. You're getting older, children may be growing up. Important milestones in your life may come and go. Maybe a close family member dies and you choose not to go to their funeral, and things, you find out that life is passing you by. But nevertheless, wasn't it important to focus on those things in order to achieve something? And that is the price we pay for anything meaningful, is that in the cost of getting something meaningful is probably that you lose something meaningful as well. Chelsea says the book, many good and thought-provoking quotes throughout, a poignant love story that doesn't end well. Okay. The author's feminist views are demonstrated in one of the main characters in a time period where women weren't meant to push those boundaries. Chelsea, do you think that she was a lesbian, the author? The story is called The Story of an African Farm. It actually was a bestseller in 1883, which is 6 years before these events that we're reading about now. Okay, let's finish up with this letter. He says, perhaps you cannot be doing your work and think of other things at the same time. It's hard enough, come to think of it, for the job is pretty thankless and its usefulness is certainly questionable. So, he's certainly thinking clearly. He says, there remains, however, the idea of an association of painters. So he still hasn't, refused 2 marriage proposals. There certainly seems to be this idea of, he hasn't yet let go of the idea of a painting studio or a painting colony. He says, of lodging them in common, some of them, though we did not succeed, though it is a deplorable and melancholy failure, the idea is still true and reasonable, like so many others, but we won't begin again. And so you can see, he's still mourning the loss of the yellow house and what it represents, the symbolism of the yellow house. He's still mourning. He's still mourning the death of a dream. And that's never easy. It's never easy. He goes on to say, understand clearly that we must get absolutely the simplest board and lodging. 80 francs ought to be enough and can be, Monsieur Saul says. Ray warns me about Saint-Remy, that it is as well to remember that a good many of the patients are fairly well off, and some of them spend a lot of money, which often does them more harm than good. I can well believe it. And I think that in my case, nature by herself will do much more for me than any remedies. Here I take nothing. I may still have to pay 11 francs 87 in installment for the furniture. At least they sent me a bill for it, besides the rest of the rent, which I still owe the landlord. And I must send you my collection of pictures before going to Saint-Remy. I have one case already packed. I would like to write you about something else. I wonder what that is. But my mind is taken up with arranging this business and I can't find the ideas I'm seeking, so as to write to you about several things at once. Goodbye for now. I hope you and your wife have a good journey. Ever yours, Vincent. And now we're going to deal with the very last letter. Well, the last letter for this episode, but it's from Theo. How does Theo respond to all of this? And so this is what he says. And it's written from Paris. It's dated the 14th of April, but I'm not sure if that's a typo. Anyway, he says, "My dear Vincent, I was greatly touched by your letter, which we received yesterday." Let's just have a look at that footnote. Okay. Really, you are making far too much of something which is entirely natural, without taking into account that you have repaid me many times over by your work as well as by your friendship, which is of greater value than all the money I shall ever possess. Well, I don't know. I almost want to cry hearing those words. It's like, what a generous um, human being, right? What a wonderful, generous human being. I mean, wouldn't we all want to have a Theo in our lives, right? Uh, wouldn't we all want to be blessed with a Theo like this? He says, you know, you're making far too much of something which is entirely natural without taking into account that you have repaid me many times over by your work as well as by your friendship, which is of greater value than all the money I shall ever possess. What a thing to say. It is very painful for me to know that you are still in an imperfect state of health, though it seems to me that nothing in your letter betrays a weakness of the mind. I mean, that's what I've been saying. You know, if he's so off his rocker, why do his letters read so succinctly? On the contrary, the fact that you deem it necessary to go to a sanatorium is in itself rather serious. Let's hope that this is meant only as a preventative measure. So Theo is actually kind of saying, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa! I don't really think you need to go to Saint-Remy. You know, isn't there maybe an alternative? Isn't like maybe that's like the worst case scenario? We can keep that as a plan B. We can keep that on the back burner, right?" And then he says, I thought he was actually going to say the fact that you deem it necessary to go to a sanatorium also shows that you in possession of your senses, you know, or maybe even too much in possession of your senses. Seeing that I know you well enough to consider you capable of all imaginable sacrifices. So you see what he says there? I know you well enough to consider you capable. Well, what did Saul say in his letter to Theo? He said that Vincent said, I am not capable. And what is his brother saying? You are capable, you are capable. I know you are capable. Well said. We must find our Theo and be a Theo too. Well said. And then he says, I've been contemplating the possibility that you have thought of the solution in order to inconvenience less those who know you. And so, isn't that true? Theo is saying, you know what? I know you're doing this because you're trying to minimize the burden on me, but it's not necessary. It's not necessary that you do that. It's this the step that you want to take isn't necessary. And what is the word that he uses up here? He says, um, You are making far too much of something. In other words, you're being a little dramatic. You taking it too far. And then he says, remember, okay, so then he says, if this should be the case, I implore you not to do it. Don't go to the asylum, for life in such an establishment can hardly be pleasant. And he's right. So you should know well what you're going to do, and I think you ought to consider whether you should perhaps try something else first. Either you might come here for some time, or you might go to Port Arvin during the summer, or again you might go and board with people who would take care of you. So, he's saying, and I mean, think about this. Theo and Vincent went separated from one another with a bit of unhappiness. Vincent wasn't treating Theo very well, and they weren't really getting along that well. Theo is saying, "You're welcome to come stay with me now," despite whatever drama happened with Gorgan. He's saying, "You are welcome at my home," even though he's gotten married. He's generous enough to say, "You can come here if you want to. You can come here. If you don't want to come here, you can go to Port Arvin for the summer. That would be nice. Port Arvin or the asylum. Come here or the asylum. You want to board with people? We can maybe set that up, or the asylum." And he ends up going to the asylum. If, however, there was no hidden meaning in what you said, and even that is quite incredible, that he is one of the criticisms I've heard, and I acknowledge with my theory about what happened to Van Gogh is, why doesn't he he talks about so many things. Why doesn't he acknowledge it in his letters to Theo, right? Is this the answer? Even Theo is saying sometimes you're a little cryptic, right? And so he says, if there's no hidden meaning in what you said when you wrote me, this is a big clue to the mystery of Van Gogh, the mystery of the ear, the mystery of the end of his life. He writes things in a way that is somewhat cryptic sometimes. He says, I think you are quite right in going to Saint-Remy. So he's saying, do you realize it's going to be quite tough? I am offering you some easy alternatives. But then he also says, you're quite right. He says, by staying there for some time, you will be able to regain confidence in your strength, and nothing will prevent you from returning to all after a certain lapse of time. So he's saying, I do agree that you would be able to regain your confidence there. He says, Monsieur Saul sent me some prospectuses of the Saint-Remy establishment, and it says that a third person should apply for admission. So I enclosed the letter to the director of the establishment, which you may use as you think fit. As soon as you have decided in going away, I shall have the necessary money. So can you see this paragraph is basically shows it as a fait accompli, that that Theo's already thought about it and he's already approved it, but he precedes that by basically saying, you don't need to do this, and perhaps you're overreacting. So he's giving his brother an exit ramp, right? He's giving his brother the option to save face, to basically say, okay, no, let's rather do something else. But at the same time, he's also saying, if this is what you want to do and maybe it is the right thing, well, then I'm going to facilitate that. Then he says, now I only want to add that we have been here since Saturday, By Monday, we had more or less installed ourselves, and the apartment looks more lived in every day, thanks to all sorts of interventions of Joe's. One wonders whether the difference between this paragraph and this one was maybe he had a conversation with his wife. We thoroughly understand each other, so we feel such a complete mutual satisfaction that we feel happier than I should say. We left mother and the sisters in perfect health. So you can see Theo has been very happy. Mother seems to be growing younger. She has now returned to Bladau after an absence of about a month. My wedding gave her a lot of pleasure, particularly because Joe and she and Will got on perfectly with each other. Besides, she has something so sincere in her ways that there are quite a number of persons on whom she makes a very pleasant impression. Although there are many things in life which she knows nothing of and which she will have to form an opinion about, she has such a foundation of goodwill and of zeal for doing the right thing that I'm no longer afraid of the disillusions which I feared before our marriage. So, if Theo has a couple of good bones in his body, it seems like he got quite a few of them from his own mother, because he described his mother as having such a foundation of goodwill and zeal for doing the right thing. He says, up until now, if all goes better than I've been able to imagine, I never dared hope for so much happiness. And, that's also got to be crushing for Van Gogh to read. I think, obviously on paper, you would want to feel happy for your sibling. Obviously, on paper, you'd want to feel glad that your sibling has found their way to joy and happiness. But it's got to sting that this is happening at this time, that this incredible, unimaginable happiness that Theo's enjoying is happening at a time of such acute and unbearable despair for his brother. It's got to sting. And, think about what you're talking about. Theo's happiness is kind of in the consummation, in a sort of coming together with another person, someone who's going to love him, someone who's going to be his companion, someone who's going to be his confidant, someone who's going to be just like in this intimate place in his heart. That is exactly what Vincent's looking for. He's also looking for companionship. He just doesn't want to be alone. And think about the epitome of the opposite of being alone. It's being in love. The epitome of the opposite of being sort of in that state where you can't look after yourself and you in such a state of misery and brokenness and dysfunction. Well, isn't the opposite of that being blissfully in love with someone who's also taking care of you? You taking care of them and they're taking care of you. Anyway, he goes on to say, in Holland, I lacked the time to see many pictures. Notwithstanding this, I saw the Jewish bride. I don't know, that's quite a frumpy picture, but I guess that's where, in that picture, there's a deep sense of love and commitment in the Dutch tradition. And that's what is resonating with Theo. And he says, and other Rembrandts again, and Frans Hals's at Haarlem. And we spoke about Frans Hals in the previous Van Gogh letters. And he says, which I thought more beautiful than ever before. And the portrait of an old lady by Rembrandt in the museum at Brussels. How beautiful the last named picture is. There's really nothing more remarkable and characteristic in Holland than those old portraits. One feels far removed from this epoch when one looks at the follows of today. I think that should be fellows. There was an exhibition at CM's of charcoal sketches. I'm just trying to think by Mauve. I think that's their uncle. Leaves out his sketchbooks, very touching things. Jet gave us one of these drawings as a present, which I'm very, very grateful of. And so this letter is full of references to all sorts of people, their mother, the sister, their uncle, his wife being this wonderful person, colleagues of theirs. Theo is really kind of riding a wave of post honeymoon pleasure. He's just really in a good place, whereas his brother is in like on a downward spiral. He says, write us soon what you have definitely decided and do not despair, for assuredly better days will come to you. I shake both your hands, Theo. Honeymoon bliss, that's it. That frumpiness was the fashion of the day. Okay. Okay. And so we're going to end over there. It's the 24th of April. The next letter is the 25th, but we'll deal with that in Van Gogh letters 80. Van Gogh letters 80 will probably be when I'm in America. I'll probably do that from America, presumably Myrtle Beach. I have to say, my whole trip to America right now is totally like I've never had such a unclear idea of where I'm going to be. I mean, I know I'm going to be in Myrtle Beach, but there's a possibility that I'm going to Lake Tahoe. Is it Tahoe? Lake Tahoe. There's a triathlon series that I'm really interested in, the T100 series. There's a race in San Francisco on the, I think, 7th and 8th of June. If my hero, if Lucy Charles Barkley takes part in that, then I really feel like I need to be there myself, which is at least 2 or 3 weeks longer than I intend to be in America. I feel like I'm only budgeting for 1 month in America, but there are all sorts of reasons to stay longer. There's Crime Con in Nashville, Tennessee, and Cotton Star is going to be there, and I sort of feel like maybe I should go there myself. So I don't know. I thought I was going to go to Florida, but I believe the some insects are going to be coming out in their trillions. Is it cicadas? It's a kind of insect that makes like a sizzling noise. I'm not sure if I want to be there for that. So I don't know. Like I don't know whether I'm gonna do the shoestring version and just go to Myrtle Beach, go to Indiana, attend a few days trial, and then come back, or do the next step version of that, which is go to Crime Con in Nashville, or to do the next step on top of that, which is attend that triathlon in San Francisco, which is not where I want to go. I don't want to go to California, meaning I don't want to go all the way to the other side of the country. I need to come all the way back just because it's so expensive. And I don't want to be on flights all the time. I don't want to fly as much as I've been flying. So far, both trips I did to America, I think I caught 14 flights in total. That's not only expensive, but it's exhausting. I don't know if I want to do that again. But I do know attending that T100 might be the kind of inspiration boost that I need to get my triathlon journey back on track. I mean, I really do want, in the same way that Van Gogh wants to paint, I want to do triathlon again. That's a dimension of my life that's been absent or been on the back burner for for more than a decade, and I now that I can run again, now that my knee's okay, I sort of feel I wanna see what I can do. Did I tell you guys my brother came sixth in South Africa in his age group in a triathlon race in the past month or so? He's 2 years older than what I am. So, I don't think it's being fanciful to think about that when he's doing that right now. Yeah, you can search for non-Boeing flights, okay? So, my brother's quite inspiring to me in that respect. And so that's why I'm saying I might want to go to San Francisco because honestly, the person that I most admire right now is Lucy Charles Barkley. I just think she's incredible. And she's also in her own little battle. She came second yesterday. So she's the world champion, right? She's the world Ironman champion. She was leading the race in the swim, leading the race in the bike, and led the race till the last 4Ks of the run. And then someone overtook her. She led Ashley Gentle by, is it Ashley Gentle or Ashley Gentile? I think it's not quite sure, but she was in front of her with 5.5 minutes. And then Ashley passed her in the last 4 kilometers. In other words, she led the race for 95%, 99% of the race. Hang on, it's 95% of the race, 96% she led it, and then lost it in the last 4 kilometers. And so, in a way, I think even Lucy Charles feels a bit like Vincent van Gogh, in the sense of she deserves to win. She deserves credit. She deserves the gold medal. She's worked hard enough for it, but she's just sometimes life is a bit unfair. Sometimes life's a bit cruel. And so, I would love to go to San Francisco and maybe Lucy Charles wins that race. And because she really does deserve to win more races. She is the world champion. And I've no doubt that she will. She just needs to strengthen her torn calf muscle and up her volume of running. But if you're the world champion and you lead a race as hard as the one that was yesterday, I've been to Singapore and I know how hot it is there. To come second right at the end has got to be devastating. Got to be devastating. And she handled it with such grace. I'm sure she went to a hotel room and cried, but I'm sure she'll also come back fighting. So that is my thing. Stephanie, I think when I've done a really good triathlon, then I'll maybe reach out. So maybe then. Okay. Anyway, I want to thank you guys for being here. Must say this is quite a powerful Van Gogh Letter 79. I had an idea what it was about, but I actually had no idea it was this powerful. At one point, I was almost tearful. Theo's response to Vincent, but also, even though I've written a book about Van Gogh, you really realize what that poor man went through. And I don't know, I take great comfort out of that. The fact that, you or I, in a particular situation, we are not the first to suffer. We are not the first to go through almost unimaginably terrible trials. And the fact that other people have gone through them, just the fact that they've gone through them is definitely a comfort. It's that it's not just, you're not the only person that has had very, kind of feels like very bad luck or misfortune smiling on you, And I certainly take comfort in that, that one is not alone in one's despair. One's not alone in one's loneliness. One's not alone in one's um, trying to bring courage to bear in a situation that's um, testing your courage, testing your ability to deal with fear, rational fear. Thanks so much, Chelsea. I appreciate it. It's wonderful to see Stephanie. I always feel like the community is complete. I'm actually hoping to see Manhattan Stephanie when I'm in New York. I have reached out to her, so I probably will see her. But anyway, I'll let you know if I do. So yeah. Um, but the next Van Gogh letters, I'll be in America. Van Gogh letters 80, and we're getting very very close now to Starry Night. Starry Night was basically painted in terms of real time a month and a half from now. So kind of in the midsummer of 1889. Bear in mind, Van Gogh is kind of in a prison, watching summer go by in front of his the window of the asylum. So it's kind of within that context. Think of it as well. Think about that feeling where spring comes and summer comes, but you actually in a hospital. You're watching life return to the world, greenness, the world swarming with green and buzzing with green, and you are watching that from the inside of a hospital where the people around you are sick, or they're just not, they're not able to live, they're not able to participate in life, certainly for the moment. It's got to be, you've got to get a bit of a jaundiced view of how beautiful it is outside your window when you can't enjoy it. Deborah says, I remember when I was that fit. Glad to have you here, Stephanie. By the way, I think I was with Stephanie and John when the picture behind me was taken. I think, do you remember that picture, Stephanie? And I think this picture is from MoMA, isn't it? This picture's from MoMA. It's not from the Met. That's how I remember it. Starry Nighttime. Yep. Okay, before I go, I want to just show you again a book that I bought that I found very moving. Let me just get to that. Timmy. Where is it? I thought it was in there. Okay, so when I was in Namibia, and I must say, I find Namibia tremendously interesting environment. I can't wait to actually go back. I bought this book when I was there, Solitaire, Home in the Namib Desert, and it's about a Dutch filmmaker. Can you see it's written by Ton van der Leer? And that's really the only reason why I paid attention to it was he shares most of my family name, and so I just happened to pick the book up, looked at it, and I really appreciated the whole sentiment of it. And the book is about this guy, a Dutch filmmaker who just suddenly found life was not meaningful to him in the Netherlands. And let me read what it says here. So it says, when successful film producer Ton van der Leer turned 40, so maybe there's a bit of a midlife crisis. He turns 40. He finds his life empty and devoid of meaning. On an impulse, he decides to sell his company in Amsterdam and journey into the unknown, seeking escape from stress and Western materialism. So a little bit of the Van Gogh journey as well. He goes somewhere to find himself, to find inspiration. His quest takes him to Cape Town, where he buys an old car and sets out towards the heart of Africa, stopping for petrol in a remote settlement called Solitaire. That's where we went as well, and that's where I bought this book. Ton falls in love with the beauty of the Namibian wilderness and stays to start a small business. After a strong start, a terrible human drama gradually unfolds. And this is a true story. This is not fiction. This is a true story. And it's also full of tragedy and some terrible drama. Solitaire is an old school adventure through the Namib Desert, Kaoka Land, the Kalahari, and the Tsodilo Hills in Botswana. It was the mid-90s when Namibia was newly independent, so written about 25 years ago. A time when a traveler could still roam freely through untrammeled wilderness and across unmarked borders. Ton's longing for freedom and adventure, his search for meaning and the spirituality found in nature, is a classic quest for renewal in the African wilderness. And I kind of feel like I'm in the same place. I sort of feel like I also need a sense of renewal. It's not just being refreshed. It's kind of being renewed. It's a brand new journey. It's a brand new consciousness. It's a brand new awakening. It's a brand new you. It's almost like where you reinvent yourself again, right? And it's a story of paradise found and lost again, a story of hope and tragedy, and above all, a celebration of the beauty of Africa. And so, yeah, this is a book I really recommend. There was actually a section I wanted to read with you guys and for you guys, but we'll maybe get to that at another time. But this book really did touch me. Anyway, I don't know if you're going to be able to find it on Amazon. I found it at the bookshop in Solitaire. If you want to read it, you're going to have to get it from me. So there's already one person in the queue to read it. Whether I can do it as part of a book club thing, we can maybe I can maybe read an excerpt from it. I was actually looking for whether I think I identified a chapter that I wanted to read from. I can maybe do that. Anyway, I've been going through some of my hard drives, and there's so many photos that I haven't shown you guys. So many photos from many states in America, and also from trips, just photos that I've taken, and I've just done nothing with them. So I sort of feel like I need to spend a bit of time putting those together. I actually found some photos I took of Namibia that I want to collect and share. So maybe I'll do that at some point. Okay, we had about the 3-hour mark. Thank you to the 30 of you who attended class. It's definitely going to work towards your graduation. Let's have a look at the poll. What do you guys say? Where did Van Gogh go after he was booted out of the Yellow House? To the asylum? Well, that is what most of us would think. The correct answer is he stayed in Emre's apartment. I'm still not 100% sure if that's true. It was certainly part of the plan, but I don't think he stayed there very long, if he did stay there. It does seem as though he stayed there briefly. So the correct answer there is the last answer. And that is what we're trying to do. We are learning as we go, and that's another thing we've learned, that is a popular misconception. Let's just go through the last couple of comments from you guys. Absolutely. To feel renewed, you've got to go out. You've got to go outside. You've got to go outside of yourself. You've got to go and see something that you don't already know. You've got to move beyond what you know. And that takes courage. I mean, you've got to step into the unknown. You've got to open that door and walk through it. Yvonne says, reinvention is very refreshing. That's so true. So true. Paddy says, you're very skilled at deciphering and relating things to the human element. Thanks, Paddy. Thanks, Bex. Mel Stiller says, when I feel better, I plan to visit my favorite bookstore. Lots of treasures to be found. I hope you're feeling better, Mel. I know you bumped your head against the coffee table. One thing that's really incredible about books are, I read this book when I was in Nature's Valley in a cabin surrounded by the woods. And I felt like I was on this incredible adventure through the desert where I'd just come from. And it was just really, it's really amazing how a book can take you into someone else's life in a way that a movie doesn't quite do that. A book can literally take you through someone else's life, just like Van Gogh's letters are taking us on a very intimate journey through another person's life. And that is the magic and the marvel of the written word. Stephen King once said that yes, we can actually read someone else's mind. It's called writing. And it is actually incredible. That whole process really is incredible. You can live so many lives through reading books. You can live through so many experiences that you could actually never experience yourself. You do experience through books, right? Okay, I think that's it. Mel says, I smashed my poor nose. Okay, I hope you didn't break it. Beck says, I get sad when a good book ends. I feel like I've lost my friends. Yeah. No, it is like that. You sort of feel like, yeah, you wish it's not going to end, but it eventually does, right? Paddy says, looking at Starry Night, everyone experiences something different and sees their own picture. Ain't that the truth? Okay, anyway, that's it from me. Strange, my purple heart disappears after it's entered into the text box. That is strange. Okay, anyway, that's it from me. Thanks a lot to you guys for being here. I really do appreciate it. And it's so nice that so many of you have come, so many of you have been here since the very beginning. Van Gogh letters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, we did lose Yvonne along the way, but it's so wonderful to have Yvonne back with us. And, you know, Yvonne is actually an artist. Jalcy's also paints quite often. So it really is nice to have the class together. So good to see you guys. As I say, I'm going to be back in 2 weeks, more than likely. I don't guarantee that, but I don't think I'm going to be here. I'm just going to see when is next week. The 21st. I suppose I could do Van Gogh letters next week, and then I can't really guarantee after that. So I might be next week. So anyway, I'll let you guys know. Just depends on what's going on. I think I'm still here next week, and then I might not be that available. So Van Gogh letters 80, probably next week, so look out for that. I am definitely feeling a little more nervous than usual given what's been going on with Boeing. And this is a very long flight. It's actually ends up being, just to get to New York, it ends up being 4 flights back to back. So it's not for the faint of heart. But I feel for for Lisa Wilson when she flew here from California. It was 5 flights back to back, California to New York to Europe to Paris in her case to South Africa, and then flights within South Africa. Anyway, again, guys, thanks very much. See you guys next time. I just need to bring up the peach stuff for the closing music. I'm going to be working on an Alec Baldwin thing on the TCRS channel. I don't know if I'll put it up today, but that's what's coming up next. So you guys get an exclusive peek. I'm thinking of jogging through Central Park with a GoPro on my chest. So that might be, if not the next Team Peachtree video, certainly one of the next, and that should be quite exciting. That's something I was never able to do because I was injured, is jog through Central Park. So I'm looking forward to doing that later this April. Definitely looking forward to that. Also looking forward to jogging on Myrtle Beach. Okay, guys, take care. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope you having a good weekend, and I'll see you guys next time. Ciao.